Marcus Chen stood in the waiting room of the Galactic Council testing facility and tried not to feel small. The room was huge, with ceilings that stretched up so high he could barely see them. Around him sat other beings who would take the survival test. None of them were human. To his left sat a creature that looked like it was made of blue crystal. It sparkled when light hit it, and Marcus could see through parts of its body. The Keth, as their species was called, didn't seem to notice him at all. It just sat there, humming softly, absorbing the light from the bright panels above. On his right was something that looked like a cross between a rhinoceros and a bear, but with 6 legs and plates of armor covering its whole body. The Dralion was massive. Each of its legs was thicker than Marcus's whole body. It breathed slowly, and each breath sounded like wind through a tunnel. Across the room, Marcus watched a cloud of purple gas float near the ceiling. The veil form had no solid body at all. It just drifted, changing shape slightly, like smoke from a fire. Marcus wondered how something without a body could take a survival test, but he figured they had their ways. A door opened, and a 4-armed creature walked in. It had gray skin and large eyes that seemed to look in multiple directions at once. This was Proctor Velnash, the administrator who would explain the test. "Applicants," Velnash said, his voice echoing in the large room. "Welcome to Station Theta 9. You are here to take the Galactic Survival Certification Test. This test is required for all beings who wish to travel alone in unexplored space." Marcus sat up straighter. This was what he had traveled 3 months to reach. He needed this certification. Without it, he couldn't go to the places he wanted to explore. Velnash moved to the center of the room. All 4 of his arms gestured as he spoke. "The test is simple. You will be placed in a hostile environment. You will have 48 hours to complete 3 objectives. First, you must acquire food. Second, you must create shelter. Third, you must reach the extraction point, which will be 10 kilometers from your starting location." The Dralion snorted, a sound like a small explosion. The Keth continued humming. The veil form swirled slowly. "The most important rule," Velnash continued, and his eyes fixed on each applicant in turn, "is this: no tools allowed." Marcus raised his hand. Velnash's eyes turned to him, and Marcus felt the weight of that stare. The proctor walked closer. "The human has a question," Velnash said. There was something in his tone that Marcus couldn't quite identify. Pity, maybe, or doubt. "What exactly counts as a tool?" Marcus asked. Velnash's 4 arms crossed over his chest. "Nothing manufactured, nothing brought from outside. You may only use your body and what the environment provides in its natural state. The test measures whether your species can survive using only what evolution gave you." Marcus nodded slowly. "So I can't bring anything with me?" "Correct. You will wear basic protective clothing as your species requires covering, but nothing else. No weapons, no equipment, no devices. Only you." Velnash paused. "I must tell you, human, that your species has attempted this test before. None have passed." The crystalline Keth turned slightly, its faceted body reflecting Marcus's image back at him a dozen times. The Dralion made a rumbling sound that might have been laughter. "Why do humans fail?" Marcus asked. Velnash's expression was hard to read, but his voice was gentle. "Your species has no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no sharp teeth. Your skin is thin. You have no armor, no shell. You cannot fly, you cannot burrow, you cannot breathe underwater. You are not very strong compared to most species. You are not very fast. You need food and water constantly. In short, human, your species is—" He paused, searching for words. "Not built for survival." Marcus felt the eyes of every being in the room on him. He could walk away now. No one would blame him. The test had a 20% survival rate across all species. For humans, Velnash had implied, it was much worse. But Marcus didn't stand up to leave. Instead, he smiled, "I'd like to clarify one more time," Marcus said. "The rule is that I can't bring tools with me. But if I find things in the environment, I can use them?" "In their natural state, yes," Vel Nash said. "A rock is a rock. A stick is a stick. You may use what you find as you find it." "And I can't bring manufactured items?" "Correct." Marcus's smile grew a little wider. "Then I'd like to register for the test." Vel Nash studied him for a long moment. Then he handed Marcus a data pad. "Press your hand here to sign the waiver. You acknowledge that injury or death may occur. You acknowledge that you take the test of your own free will. You acknowledge that the Galactic Council is not responsible for any outcome." Marcus pressed his hand to the pad. It beeped and glowed green. "The test will begin in 3 standard days," Vel Nash said. "Use that time to rest and prepare mentally. Though I must advise you again, human, that preparation may not be enough." He turned to address all the applicants. "You are dismissed. Return here in 3 days at dawn cycle." The beings began to leave. The Drallian walked out, each footstep shaking the floor slightly. The Keth drifted toward the light panels near the exit. The veil form simply flowed through a ventilation grate. Marcus stood and walked to the viewing window. Outside, he could see the stars. Somewhere out there was a planet with ancient ruins. A dead civilization that had left buildings and art and writing that no one had fully studied yet. Marcus had spent his whole life studying how people lived, how they survived, how they built societies. He was a xenoanthropologist, but he had another hobby too. He studied human prehistory. He studied how ancient humans, tens of thousands of years ago, had survived on Earth when they had no cities, no farms, no metal tools. He had learned the old skills as a hobby: flint knapping, fire making, tracking, cordage, primitive weapons. Vel Nash had said humans had no natural abilities for survival, but Marcus knew something the proctor didn't understand. Humans did have a natural ability. It just wasn't claws or armor or venom. It was something much more powerful. Behind him, Vel Nash was making notes on his data pad. Marcus could see the reflection in the window. The proctor was writing his assessment of each applicant. When he reached Marcus's entry, he paused for a long time. Then he typed something and shook his head. Marcus didn't need to see the screen to guess what it said. Probably something about low survival probability. Probably something about humans being too weak for the test. That was fine. Marcus had been underestimated before. He looked out at the stars and thought about sharp stones and strong rope and straight spears. He thought about 40,000 years of human survival knowledge coded not in his genes, but in his brain. The test said no tools allowed. Marcus couldn't bring tools, but no one said he couldn't make them. He smiled at his reflection in the window and turned to leave. He had 3 days to rest. Then he would show the galaxy what humanity's real natural ability was. The world appeared around Marcus in a flash of light. One moment he was standing in the transport chamber, and the next he was on a mountainside. The air was cold and thin. The sun was low in the sky, maybe 2 hours from setting. He was alone. Marcus looked down at himself. He wore simple cloth pants and a shirt, nothing more. His feet had basic shoes, just enough to protect him from sharp rocks. On his wrist was a small device that showed 3 things: a timer counting down from 48 miles, a list of his 3 objectives, and a small map showing the terrain. A red dot 10 kilometers away marked the extraction point. He took a deep breath and looked around. He stood on a slope covered in pine-like trees. Below him, he could hear the sound of running water. A river. Maybe 100 meters down the slope. Above him, the mountain continued up to a rocky peak. The temperature was dropping fast as the sun fell toward the horizon. Most people, Marcus thought, would panic right now. They would rush toward the extraction point or search frantically for food or try to find a cave to hide in. Marcus did none of these things. Instead, he started walking slowly down the slope toward the river, looking at everything around him. He looked at the trees, at the rocks, at the plants. He wasn't just seeing them. He was seeing what they could become. The trees had straight branches. Good. The rocks varied in color and type. Very good. He saw plants with fibrous bark. Excellent. Near the river there would be smooth stones worn by water. Perfect. By the time he reached the river, the sun was touching the mountains in the distance. Marcus didn't have much time before dark. He knelt by the water and began examining stones. He picked up dozens, looking at how they broke, how they felt in his hand, what color they were. Most people wouldn't know what he was looking for, but Marcus did. He found it on his 20th try, a dark gray stone, fine-grained, that broke in a particular way when he struck it against another rock. Chert. Not as good as flint, but it would work. He gathered several pieces and moved away from the water to a flat area surrounded by trees. Then Marcus sat down cross-legged on the ground and placed one of the chert stones on his thigh. He picked up a heavier, rounder stone to use as a hammer, and he began to work. Strike. A flake of stone broke away from the main piece, sharp as broken glass. Strike. Another flake. Strike. 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 The sound of stone on stone echoed through the darkening forest. Marcus worked slowly, carefully. Each strike was controlled. Each angle was precise. This was a skill that humans had invented hundreds of thousands of years ago, long before recorded history. The skill to turn a rock into a blade. Far above Marcus, in a station orbiting the test planet, Proctor Velnash sat in the monitoring room. Screens showed all 4 test takers. The Keth was moving toward a sunny clearing, preparing to absorb light energy through the night. The Dralian was testing its armor against tree trunks, breaking wood to clear a path. The Veilform was flowing through the terrain, scouting, and the human was sitting on the ground, hitting rocks together. "What is he doing?" asked another proctor. "A insect-like being named Chidar." Velnash leaned closer to the screen. "I'm not certain." They watched as Marcus continued his work. The sun set completely. The human didn't stop. In the darkness, they could only hear the sound of stone on stone, steady and rhythmic. "Is he trying to make fire?" Chidar asked. "No," said a third voice. An old reptilian creature named Shesra moved closer to the screens. She had been a proctor for 300 years. "He's making tools." Velnash stood up quickly. "That's against the rules." "Is it?" Shesra's eyes didn't leave the screen. "Check the regulations." Velnash pulled up the rulebook on his datapad. He read the relevant section out loud. "No tools allowed. Applicants may not bring manufactured items into the test environment. Applicants must rely only on their natural abilities." "And what is he doing?" Shesra asked. "He's manufacturing tools," Velnash said. "No," Shesra said slowly. "He's not bringing them in. He's making them from materials found in the environment. The rules say he can't bring manufactured items. They don't say he can't manufacture items during the test." The monitoring room fell silent, except for the sound from Marcus's screen. Strike, strike, strike. On the mountainside, Marcus had completed his first tool. It was a hand axe, a teardrop-shaped piece of chert with sharp edges all around. It fit perfectly in his palm. He set it aside and began working on another stone. This time he made thin, sharp flakes, each one like a knife blade. The temperature was dropping fast now. Marcus could see his breath in the air. He stood up, gathered his stone tools, and began collecting materials. He found dead branches and pulled them into a pile. He stripped bark from certain trees, the kind with inner bark that was stringy and strong. He gathered dry grass and wood shavings. Then he found 2 sticks, one flat piece of dead wood and one straight, hard branch. He used his sharp stone flake to carve a notch in the flat piece and to point the end of the straight stick. Marcus placed the flat piece on the ground, put the pointed stick in the notch, and began to spin it between his palms. Fast, steady, up and down the stick, spinning it against the notch. Friction. Heat. The monitoring room erupted in noise. "Is he making fire?" Chidar's voice was shocked. "Without tools?" Another proctor gasped. "He's using tools he made," Vel Nash said. But his voice was uncertain now. Shesra said nothing. She just watched. On the screen, a thin stream of smoke rose from the notch in the wood. Marcus didn't stop. He spun faster. The smoke grew thicker. Then, a tiny glowing ember appeared in the dust created by the friction. Marcus carefully transferred it to his bundle of dry grass and wood shavings. He blew gently. Smoke. More smoke. Then a small flame appeared, yellow and bright in the darkness. Marcus fed the flame with small twigs, then larger sticks, then branches. Soon he had a fire burning steadily. The light and heat pushed back the cold mountain night. "Incredible," whispered Chidar. But Marcus wasn't done. Using the light from his fire, he began to build. He found long branches and leaned them against a fallen log, creating a triangular frame. He covered this with pine boughs and more branches, layering them like roof tiles. In 30 minutes, he had a basic lean-to shelter. The fire burned at its entrance, reflecting heat into the small space. Marcus checked his wrist monitor. The objective, create shelter, now showed as complete. The timer read 42.23 to 15. He had been in the test environment for less than 6 hours. He sat by his fire and examined his stone tools. The hand axe was good. The blades were sharp. But he would need more. Tomorrow he would need weapons for hunting, rope for carrying things, a spear for defense. All of those things were possible. All of those things were made from materials around him. None of them were manufactured items brought from outside. Marcus fed more wood to his fire and smiled. The test designers had thought no tools meant humans would be helpless. They didn't understand that tool-making wasn't something humans did. It was what humans were. Every human carried 40,000 years of survival knowledge in their brain, passed down not through genes, but through learning. Other species had claws that grew from their bodies. Humans had stone blades that grew from their knowledge. In the monitoring room, Vel Nash sat down slowly. "We need to call the certification board," he said. "This changes everything." Shesara's old eyes gleamed in the light of the monitors. "No," she said. "Let him continue. I want to see what else this human can do." Marcus lay down in his shelter, the fire warm, the night sky full of stars above the mountains. Tomorrow would be about food and hunting. Tonight was about rest. He had passed the first test, but he knew the real challenges were still coming. Marcus woke with the dawn. The fire had burned down to coals, but they were still warm. He fed them with small sticks and brought the flames back to life. The morning air was cold, and his breath made clouds of mist. He checked his wrist monitor. Timer, 36, 45, 22. Objectives remaining: acquire food, reach extraction point. He had plenty of time, but Marcus knew better than to waste it. Today he would hunt, and to hunt successfully, he needed better tools. First, he needed rope. Rope changed everything. With rope, you could tie, bind, carry, trap, and build. Marcus walked down to the river and found the trees he had identified yesterday. Their bark came off in long strips, revealing fibrous inner layers. He gathered several large pieces and brought them back to his shelter. Sitting by the fire, Marcus began to process the bark. He separated the fibers, pulling them into thin strands. Then he did something that would look strange to anyone watching. He rolled the fibers on his thigh, twisting them as he rolled. 2 fibers twisted together. As they twisted, they grabbed each other, becoming one stronger cord. He repeated this process over and over. 2 strands became 1 cord, 2 cords became thicker rope. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory from hundreds of hours of practice back on Earth. In the monitoring room, more proctors had gathered. Word was spreading through the station about the human who was making tools. A dozen species representatives watched the screens now. "He's making rope," Shesara said, "from plant fibers." "How does his species know this?" asked a proctor whose body was made of liquid metal. "Does it come from genetic memory?" "No," said a new voice. Everyone turned. A human woman in a uniform stood at the entrance. She was Captain Sarah Rodriguez from Earth's Exploration Corps. Someone had called her about the unusual test. "We learn it. Humans pass knowledge through teaching, not genetics. This skill is 40,000 years old." Velnash gestured at the screen where Marcus was twisting rope. "But this test is meant to measure natural abilities. Learned skills are not natural." Captain Rodriguez smiled. "For humans, learning is our natural ability. Our brains are built for it. Every human child learns to make tools because that's what human brains evolved to do." On the screen, Marcus had finished making a coil of strong rope. Now he was selecting branches. He needed them straight, light but strong, about as long as his arm. He found 3 good ones and brought them back to his fire. Using his sharp stone blades, Marcus began to carve. He stripped bark from the branches. He smoothed the wood. He carved a point on one end of each branch. The points became sharp and hard, angled to pierce and cut. Then he took his best stone blade and positioned it at the tip of one branch. Using his rope, he bound the stone to the wood, wrapping it tight, securing it with special knots that wouldn't slip. When he was done, he had a spear with a stone tip sharp as glass, deadly as any metal blade. He made 2 more, 3 spears in total. "Weapons," Chittar whispered in the monitoring room. "He's made weapons from rocks and sticks." "Those aren't just weapons," Captain Rodriguez said. "That's a hunting technology that fed humanity for millennia." Marcus wasn't finished. He took more of his rope and began to make something complex. He formed loops and triggers, carved small pieces of wood, and arranged them in a specific pattern. It looked like a puzzle made of string and sticks. "What is that?" Velnash asked. "A snare," Captain Rodriguez explained. "A trap. He'll place it where animals walk, and when they step into the loop, it tightens and catches them." Marcus made 3 snares. Then he stood, gathered his spears, and began to study the ground around his shelter. He was looking for tracks, for signs of animals. The forest was full of life. You just had to know how to read it. He found what he was looking for near the river, small tracks in the soft mud, something rabbit-sized, judging by the size and spacing. He followed the trail, moving quietly, studying the bent grass and disturbed leaves. The tracks led to a well-used path through the bushes, perfect place for a snare. Marcus set his traps along the animal path, disguising them with leaves and grass. Then he moved away to hunt more actively. Hunting with a spear required patience and skill, but Marcus had both. He found a position near the river where the undergrowth was thick. Small animals would come here to drink. He waited, completely still, spear ready. The sun climbed higher. An hour passed, then another. Then he saw movement. A creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a beaver emerged from the bushes. It moved cautiously toward the water. Marcus didn't breathe. The creature was 15 feet away. Too far. It moved closer. 10 feet. Still too far for a certain throw. The creature reached the water and began to drink. 8 feet. Marcus threw. The spear flew straight and true. The stone point caught the creature in the side. It squealed once and fell. Marcus moved quickly, using his stone knife to end its suffering. He felt the familiar mix of gratitude and regret that hunters know. Life taken to sustain life. "He killed it," someone in the monitoring room said, shocked. "With a thrown spear. The accuracy required for that." "Humans are throwing specialists," Captain Rodriguez explained. Our shoulders, our arms, our eyes, all evolved to throw things with deadly accuracy. We're one of the only species in the galaxy who can do this naturally. Marcus cleaned the animal by the river, using his stone tools to prepare the meat. He checked his snares and found that one had caught another creature, 2 animals, more than enough food for the rest of the test. He brought them back to his shelter and built up the fire. Using sticks he had prepared earlier, he made a frame over the fire to cook the meat. While it cooked, he worked on processing the animals. The meat for food, the hide for carrying things, the sinew for stronger rope, the bones for tools. Nothing was wasted. By midday, Marcus had cooked meat, a primitive bag made from hide, and stronger rope made from sinew. He checked his wrist monitor. The objective, acquire food, was now marked complete. 2 objectives done. 1 remaining, reach the extraction point. But Marcus wasn't rushing. He spent the afternoon making more tools, a better axe with a stronger handle, more spears, a primitive knife with a handle wrapped in hide for better grip. He made fire-starting materials that he could carry, charcloth and a bow drill so he could make fire anywhere. By evening of the second day, Marcus sat by his fire with a full toolkit spread around him. Weapons, rope, fire-starting gear, a bag, food, cutting tools, everything he needed not just to survive, but to thrive. In the monitoring room, the crowd of proctors had grown even larger. Representatives from dozens of species stood watching the screens showing all 4 test takers. The Keth was struggling. It had found sunny areas, but at night it grew weak and cold. It was making slow progress toward the extraction point. The Dralian was doing well, using its natural strength and armor to push through obstacles. But it had trouble finding food. Its large body needed lots of energy. The veil form was moving fast, flowing through cracks and spaces, but it couldn't carry anything or manipulate the environment. It just moved, and Marcus sat by his fire with an arsenal of tools, well-fed, warm, rested, and ready. "This isn't a test anymore," Velnash said quietly. "He's not surviving. He's conquering." Shesra nodded slowly. The test was designed to see if a species could survive with their evolutionary gifts. We thought that meant claws or armor or special abilities. We never imagined a species whose evolutionary gift was the ability to make any tool they needed. Captain Rodriguez stood with her arms crossed, watching Marcus with obvious pride. "Humans don't have one tool," she said. "We have every tool, because we can make them all. That's what makes us human." Marcus checked his map. The extraction point was 10 kilometers northeast, through a canyon system. The terrain looked rough. It would take most of tomorrow to reach it, moving carefully. He packed his gear into his hide bag, banked his fire, and settled in for the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The canyon would be dangerous. There might be predators or obstacles that required all his skills. But Marcus wasn't worried. He had something better than claws or armor or special abilities. He had knowledge. He had creativity. He had hands that could shape the world. He had the most powerful natural ability in the galaxy, the human mind. Marcus woke on the 3rd day before sunrise. He ate some cooked meat from yesterday's hunt, drank from the river, and packed his camp. Everything he had made went into his hide bag: extra rope, stone blades, fire-starting materials, and food. He kept his 3 spears in his hands, ready for use. The wrist monitor showed the extraction point clearly: 10 kilometers through canyon country. The terrain map showed cliffs, narrow passages, and rocky slopes. It would be challenging, but Marcus had trained for this kind of environment. He started walking as the sun rose. The first few kilometers were through forest, similar to where he had camped. Marcus moved at a steady pace, not rushing, conserving energy. He crossed streams by walking on fallen logs. He avoided thick brush by finding animal trails. Every decision was efficient, practical. Around mid-morning, the forest ended and the canyon began. The ground dropped away into a steep-walled valley carved by ancient water. The walls were vertical stone, at least 50 feet high. There was no way around. Marcus had to go down. Other test-takers would use their natural abilities here. The Keth could have floated down with its light, crystalline body. The Dralian could have smashed its way through or climbed down with brute strength. The Veil form could simply flow down the cliff like water. Marcus had no such abilities, but he had something else. He had tools and knowledge. He studied the cliff face. There were cracks and rough spots, places where fingers and feet could grip. It was climbable, but dangerous. One mistake would mean a fatal fall. So Marcus decided not to make mistakes. He took his rope and selected several strong wooden stakes from his bag. Using a rock as a hammer, he drove stakes into the cracks in the cliff wall, one every 10 feet down. He tied his rope to the top stake, then used it to lower himself to the next stake. There he tied the rope again, then descended to the next anchor point. It took 2 hours, but Marcus reached the canyon floor safely. His rope and stakes were still above, but he didn't need them anymore. The way forward was horizontal now. In the monitoring room, technical specialists were analyzing what they had just seen. That climbing technique required advanced problem-solving, one said. He assessed risk, created safety measures, and executed a complex plan. He also had to understand leverage, friction, and weight distribution, another added. These are sophisticated concepts, Captain Rodriguez smiled. Every human learns these concepts as children. We play with ropes and tools from age 3 or 4. It seems sophisticated to you because your species don't build their entire civilization around manipulating the physical world. Velnash was quiet. He was beginning to understand something that troubled him deeply. The test was designed to be fair to all species, but it had been created by species who didn't think like humans. They had assumed no tools would level the playing field. Instead, it had given humans a chance to demonstrate their real strength. On the canyon floor, Marcus followed the winding path between stone walls. The air was cooler here, shaded from the sun. Water trickled along the rocks from underground springs. It was peaceful, almost beautiful. Then Marcus saw the tracks. They were huge, each paw print as wide as his chest. 4 toes, each with a claw mark deep in the soft earth. Fresh, maybe an hour old. Something big, heavy, and dangerous had passed this way recently. Marcus stopped walking. He studied the tracks carefully. The creature was moving in the same direction he needed to go. The spacing between prints suggested it walked on 4 legs but could probably rear up. The depth of the tracks meant it was heavy, perhaps 500 or 600 pounds. This was the test's final challenge. Every survival test included a predator, something dangerous that tested whether an applicant could handle a threat. Each test environment generated a predator that the applicant species could theoretically defeat using their natural abilities. The Dralian would use its armor and strength. The Keith could blind the predator with focused light. The Veil form could hide or escape through tiny spaces. What could a human use? Marcus looked at his spears. Then he smiled grimly. Humans could use weapons and intelligence, and something else that made humans the most dangerous hunters in Earth's history: strategy. He didn't run. He didn't hide. Instead, Marcus began to follow the tracks, moving quietly, studying the terrain. He was hunting the hunter. The tracks led deeper into the canyon, to a place where the walls narrowed and large boulders created a maze of passages. Marcus climbed up on a boulder and looked around. Then he saw it. The creature was enormous. It looked like a bear mixed with a lizard, covered in thick scales, with a mouth full of sharp teeth. It was sleeping in a sunny spot between rocks, digesting some previous meal. Marcus climbed down silently and began to prepare. He found a narrow passage between 2 large rocks, barely wide enough for him to fit through, but too narrow for the creature. He placed his largest spear at the entrance, wedged between rocks, point facing outward. Then he arranged loose rocks above that could be pushed down. Finally, he prepared his other two spears for throwing. When everything was ready, Marcus picked up a stone and threw it hard. It clattered off the rocks near the creature. The beast woke with a roar that echoed through the canyon. Its head swung toward Marcus, its eyes locked on him. It saw prey, small, weak, defenseless. It charged. Marcus ran toward his prepared position. The creature was fast, faster than he expected. He could hear its claws scraping stone, its breath like a furnace. 30 feet behind him, 20 feet, 10. Marcus dove through the narrow gap between the rocks. The creature tried to follow and wedged itself into the opening. It roared in fury, snapping at Marcus with jaws that could bite him in half. But it couldn't reach him. It was too big for the narrow space. Marcus grabbed his throwing spear. The creature's neck and head were exposed, thrashing as it tried to force its way through. Marcus threw from 6 feet away. The stone-tipped spear drove into the creature's throat. It screamed and pulled back. Marcus pushed on the loose rocks he had arranged. They tumbled down, striking the creature's head and face. It roared again, backing away, bleeding from the throat wound. Marcus didn't chase it. He had no need to kill it, only to survive. The wounded creature retreated, leaving a trail of blood, deciding that this small prey was more dangerous than it was worth. In the monitoring room, silence filled the space. Then someone began a slow clap. Others joined. Even Vel Nash, despite his concerns, felt admiration. "He didn't just survive the predator," Shesarah said. "He outsmarted it. He turned the terrain into a weapon. He prepared a trap. He used strategy that would take our species days of planning to conceive." "And he did it in minutes," Captain Rodriguez added, "because for humans, this kind of thinking is instinct." Marcus waited an hour to be sure the creature wasn't coming back. Then he continued toward the extraction point. His wrist monitor showed he was close now, less than a kilometer away. The canyon opened into a wider valley. In the center, a flat area of bare rock marked the extraction point. Marcus could see it ahead, glowing with a soft light that marked it as artificial, as part of the test. He checked his timer, 03:42:16 remaining. He had time to spare. Marcus walked to the center of the extraction zone and set down his bag of tools. He laid his spears next to it. Then he sat down and waited for the test to end. Above him, the monitoring room erupted in debate. The certification board was demanding answers. Representatives from a dozen species were arguing about rules and precedents, but Marcus didn't know any of this. He sat in the valley, surrounded by the tools he had made, and looked at the sky. Somewhere up there, ancient ruins waited. A mystery waited. Adventure waited. All he had to do was pass this test, and he was pretty sure he had. The extraction beam activated exactly on schedule. Blue light surrounded Marcus, and the canyon dissolved into brightness. When his vision cleared, he was standing in the transport chamber on Station Theta 9. A medical team waited to check him over. Standard procedure after the test. Marcus was fine. A few scratches, some sore muscles, nothing serious. He was actually in better condition than when he had started, well-fed and rested. The medical team seemed surprised by this. "Most applicants arrive exhausted," the doctor said, scanning Marcus with a medical device. "You seem energized." "I had a good 2 days," Marcus said simply. After the medical check, Marcus was directed to a waiting room. The other test takers were already there. The Keth looked dimmed, its crystalline body less bright than before. The Dralian was breathing heavily, tired from its journey. The veil form swirled slowly, almost listlessly. They all looked at Marcus as he entered. He still carried his hide bag. His clothes were dirty but intact. He looked like someone returning from a camping trip, not a survival test. "Human," the Dralian rumbled. "You survived." "Yes," Marcus said, sitting down. "Did you all make it to extraction?" The Keth's voice chimed like bells. "Barely. The night journey was difficult. My energy was depleted." I completed the test, the Dralian said, but finding food was harder than expected. I am weak from hunger. The Veilform's voice drifted like wind. I reached extraction but could not complete all objectives. I cannot manipulate solid matter well enough to build shelter. Marcus nodded sympathetically. It was a challenging test. The door opened and Proctor Velnash entered, followed by several other officials. His expression was serious, unreadable. Applicants, Velnash said, the certification board will now review your test results. This may take some time. Please wait here. But his eyes lingered on Marcus for a long moment before he left. In the board chambers, the room was crowded. Proctors, officials, and representatives from multiple species gathered around a large table. Screens on the walls showed footage from all 4 tests. We must discuss the human's test, Velnash began. His methods were unprecedented. He broke no rules, Shesara said immediately. I have reviewed the regulations extensively. He brought nothing into the test environment. Everything he used, he made from materials found there. But the spirit of the test, Velnash protested. The test is designed to measure natural abilities. Tool-making is not a natural ability. Captain Rodriguez stood up. With respect, Proctor, you're wrong. Tool-making is humanity's most natural ability. Our hands evolved to grip and manipulate. Our brains evolved to plan and create. Our eyes evolved to judge distance and accuracy. Everything about human evolution points toward one thing: making and using tools. A crystalline being, representative of the Keth, spoke up. But if tool-making is allowed, doesn't that give humans an unfair advantage? No more unfair than the Keth's ability to photosynthesize, Captain Rodriguez replied. Or the Dralian's armor. Or the Veilform's intangibility. Every species uses their evolutionary advantage. Humans just use a different kind. The difference, said a worried-looking official, is that other species' advantages are fixed. A Dralian cannot become more armored, but a human can make unlimited tools, each one more advanced than the last. Where does it end? The room fell silent. This was the real concern. Marcus hadn't just survived, he had thrived. He had turned a survival test into an engineering demonstration. Shesra stood slowly. Her old voice carried weight. I have administered tests for 300 years. I have seen thousands of beings attempt survival. Most barely succeed. Some fail. But this human... She gestured at the screen, showing Marcus defeating the predator. He didn't just pass the test. He mastered it. And he did it using only his mind and his hands. That's the problem, Velnash said quietly. The test is supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to challenge the applicant. But the human made it look easy. If we pass him, what does that say about our test? It says, Captain Rodriguez replied, that your test was designed with certain assumptions. You assumed all intelligent species would approach survival the same way. Use your body's natural features. You never imagined a species whose natural feature is the ability to change their environment instead of adapting to it. An insect-like proctor named Chitar spoke up. If we approve this, every human who takes the test will do the same. They'll all make tools. The test becomes meaningless for humans. No, Shesra said. It becomes a different test. For most species, we test. Can you survive with what you have? For humans, we test. Can you survive with what you can make? It's still a valid test of survival ability. The debate continued for hours. Arguments flew back and forth. Some wanted to disqualify Marcus on technicalities. Others wanted to change the rules going forward. A few suggested creating a separate test for tool-using species. Finally, the board's chairman called for order. We must vote. The question: did Marcus Chen pass the Galactic Survival Certification Test according to the rules as written? The vote was close, but the result was clear. Marcus had passed. The board's next decision was unanimous. The test rules would be clarified. Future tests would explicitly state no brought or manufactured tools and would acknowledge that creating tools from environmental resources was permitted if it was a species' natural ability. Marcus was called into the chambers. He entered and stood before the board, still holding his hide bag. Vel Nash stood to deliver the verdict. "Marcus Chen of Earth," he said formally, "the board has reviewed your test performance. You completed all 3 objectives within the time limit. You survived the hostile environment. You demonstrated capability for solo exploration." Marcus waited. There was a but coming. He could feel it. "However," Vel Nash continued, "your methods have caused us to reconsider what we mean by natural abilities. We have decided that tool-making for humans is indeed a natural ability. Therefore," he paused, "you have passed the test. You are certified for solo exploration." Marcus let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Thank you. But," Vel Nash added, "you should know that you have changed this test forever. Future human applicants will be judged by the standard you have set, and we will be monitoring how other tool-capable species approach the test as well." Shesra stepped forward and handed Marcus a data chip. "Your certification. You've earned it, human. You showed us that survival isn't about the body you're born with. It's about what you can do with what you have." Marcus took the chip. His license to explore. His ticket to the ancient ruins he wanted to study. Captain Rodriguez met him outside the chambers. "Congratulations," she said. "You just changed galactic policy?" "I just wanted to pass the test," Marcus said. "You did more than that. You made them understand what makes humans special. We don't have claws, but we can make knives. We don't have armor, but we can create shelter. We're not the strongest or the fastest, but we're the most adaptable." She smiled. "We're survivors because we're makers." Marcus looked at the data chip in his hand, then at the hide bag full of stone tools. "Every human has carried this ability for 40,000 years. Our ancestors survived ice ages and droughts and predators. They did it with sharp stones and clever minds. I just did what they taught us." 2 weeks later, Marcus's small ship approached an unnamed planet in an unexplored system. Sensors showed ancient structures on the surface, ruins of a civilization that died out millions of years ago. Marcus checked his equipment. He had modern tools this time, real metal and advanced technology. But in a small case, he also carried something else. A stone hand axe he had made during the test. A reminder. The ship landed near the ruins. Marcus stepped out onto alien soil, ready to uncover the past. He carried his tools, both modern and ancient. Because he was human and humans were builders, makers, and survivors. It was what they had always been. It was what they would always be.